This is the Doubtless podcast, here to help you change from a state of doubt and insecurity towards a more calm, confident, and doubtless self. I'm your host, coach and psychologist Julian, and my guests are remarkable, ambitious humans who share their stories of doubtful moments, of their insecurities, and how that shaped their successes today.
We discussed so many things in the last podcast already, and all about your backstory, all about a little bit about the ego already, a little bit about meditation. But one thing that I want to go deeper into is now the ego thing. What is it built out of? What's the false ego? Where do we have difficulties knowing what's the true us and what's the wrong us or the false ego? And I've had my journey in that as well already, to notice a lot more how it feels when it feels like the true thing, and when it feels like almost like the angel and the devil on the shoulder, when that is sort of the difference. But we discussed also already sort of the structure of the ego, and I think just for me as a recap and to ask a couple more deeper questions in that, would be amazing if you could go a little bit into what is the structure of the mind, where the ego is part of, right? So what's the structure of the mind that we have in general? And then I want to dive deeper into that.
Sure. Yeah. So, we have a gross body. It's just the physical body that we're looking at right now. And then we have a subtle body, which is the mind, right? Which is the operating system of the gross body, right? And so the mind consists of three elements, which are emotions, intellect, and ego. And so they work together to produce thoughts and plans and tactics for how to navigate life, right? And that, you can just look at the world and see that tends to work out better for some than for others. So what does it mean when it's working? What does it mean when it's not working? Well, at the core of it is the false ego. In order to act or have any sort of experience of reality, you have to have an ego. You have to have some idea of an identity, who you are, right? Now that can be made up of different things. It could be made up of your past. It could, like, I'm from Denmark. That could be there's a certain cultural, like I just visited my family a few days ago, and it's just fun because I haven't lived in Denmark for 15 plus years, but there's a certain sense of identity whenever I go back to Denmark, and it just brings out a different kind of version of me, right? Then
when you visit the parents.
Yeah, I visit the parents. I have my brother is there, who I used to play with when I was a child, and we have certain shared memories and shared experiences. There are certain things, like compared to where I'm based now in Mumbai, where it's a very, like, Mumbai as a city has more a larger population than Denmark as the country, like almost like fourfold, right? I think it's actually over 4 times as many people in that city as in the entire country of Denmark. And Denmark is a fairly secular place, right? So the G word is you're a little careful with that. So you can, instead of saying God, you would say the supreme, or you would find some more vague term. And like, there's all sorts of, and you don't have to worry about that in Mumbai. So there's all sorts of different characteristics to your identity that kind of shifts.
Yeah, when you, I think, look at the psychology of one, then in the first 7 years of a human life, then we take up so much information from our parents, from our culture, that creates some sort of imprint that is our foundation.
Yeah.
Up until sort of 7 years, we
Yeah.
take up most of our information, and then after that, we still learn, we still get ideas, but that is the base, really, the ground structure of who we think we are and where we think we belong, and what kind of patterns we have from our parents, and how we talk, how we think love works, how we think relationships work, how we think life or work works. All of that's, I think, the base, what we take with us.
Yeah, I mean, the brain is developing a lot, right? From not even having language, from not even having spatial language, right? Until you're at the age of 7, you're more or less autonomous, right? Even though you still need mom and dad to put food on the table, but you are moving around on your own and having your own opinions. Part of my upbringing was moving around. So my parents moved around while I was very young. And so it's been easy for me to project that into my adult life. That means it's fairly easy for me. Like, as we're recording this, I'm in England. I've been based in London for a number of years, 7 actually, coincidentally. And now I've relocated to Mumbai, and I go back to Denmark, and I've traveled a lot, as you know, and that has become part of my false ego. It's false because it's not actually me. It's just a collection of imprints from my past, right? So back to that point, that's part of the false ego, is the past. You have a certain accumulation of impressions that have shaped your mind, and that's what you think is real, right? But for someone else who's been living in a village in China their whole life, they have a completely different experience. Their past has created completely different imprints. And then, of course, you have a certain bodily experience. Like, I'm quite tall. That means I'm quite used to being listened to. Studies have been made that people just have a tendency to believe what tall people say. So I take that for granted.
And people with deeper voices as well.
Yeah, deep voices, exactly. So I just take it for granted that if I speak, people will listen, right? And so I project my voice with confidence as a product of that, which just makes it even more convincing. And so it's kind of that, you could say that's a little bit unfair. It's just a fact, right? That other people who maybe they're not as tall, maybe they have a squeaky voice, maybe whatever it is, right? Their experience, their sense of identity is that it's just like nobody listens, like nobody cares what anyone has to say, right? That becomes part of your sense of identity and the way that you view the entire world, right? And then you have, like you could say, just as you have the past, you have the future. That would be your ideology. Are you a capitalist? Are you a communist? Are you a socialist? Are you all the isms that we can come up with are ways that we project, if this, then such and such, right? How do we fix the world? Everyone has an idea of that. And all of these things collect into this sense of self. This is who I am in the world, right? And so that can be degrees of false, right? We talk of three modes of nature, basically. And then everyone is in some combination of those. So we have, but just for like making it easy to understand, you have these, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. So the mode of goodness is when you think things are going well, You feel safe, you feel comfortable, and you don't actually focus too much on yourself. Like we just used the example of me doing public speaking or whatnot is fairly easy for me because I just go up there thinking that people will listen and be comfortable with me speaking. And so lo and behold, they are. And so that means I can focus on the audience, or who, like in this case, I can focus on you rather than what I want to get said and am I being misunderstood and all of that. So it becomes natural to be selfless, and that works really well. So that's why the mode of goodness. It's also described as the mode of knowledge, right? Where you actually understand how things work. Right? Because if I'm doing public speaking, it is factually about the audience, not about me. Right? They didn't book me to make me feel good. They booked me to make the audience feel good. So if I go up on stage with that in mind, then I'm in the mode of goodness, right? And things tend to work out really well. And then below that, you have the mode of passion. I go up on the stage thinking about what I want out of it. But passion is, it's a, well, we hear it all the time in the West. You got to find your passion. We in the East, we do not agree with that at all. If the passion is there, you can work with it, and that's great. But if there isn't, then just leave it, because passion actually means, it actually means suffering. It means pain. That's that burning feeling. I want to do well. I want to go up on this stage and blow everyone's mind. And so I prepare for days and I can do good because I understand that me doing well is dependent on the audience being satisfied. But it's still, it is selfish as opposed to the mode of goodness where I'm not actually thinking of myself. I'm just there to do a job. So that means I can get the same result, but it's with a hell of a lot more effort because I'm worried about the result, right? And then you have
the mode of passion entails that what's actually highlighted in the West as you have to find your passion, then you don't have the feeling you have to work, or you have to find your passion so you stick with it for a very long time. I think that's maybe the narratives that there are around passion. And it's something really good, something you should strive for. Like, oh yeah, there's the job that you have to do that you don't want to do, but it pays the bills. And then you have your passion project that you do on the side because you love it so much.
Yeah.
And that seems, I think, here in the West as like almost the ultimate thing already. Like if you can do the thing that you want to do for yourself, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
But in the East, that's not the case. And that's very interesting because
well, I mean, look at the state of mental health in the West. Right. That's a result of that way of thinking. It's getting worse, right? It's bad and it's getting worse. This is why. We've somehow convinced ourselves. What you described was actually the mode of ignorance and a side dish of passion, right? Like you wake up and you have to go to your shitty job just to make money so you can barely put food on the table and pay the bills, and then you have to come home and the kids want your attention, but you're already worn out. But then at least out in the garage or down in the basement, you have your little passion project where you can dream of making it big. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen. It just burns you out, right? So let's pretend. So so we'll get back to this. Just put a pin in that. We'll get back to this scenario I just described because I don't want to depress anyone. It's because the reality is we don't actually have to change anything external. We just have to change the way we look at it, right? So because I just wanted to get the categories done, and then we can get back to this example and fix it, right? Mm-hmm. So the mode of passion is really worried about the results because we want to make it big, we want to be a success, and then we'll be happy. If we get the money, we get the girl, we get the promotion, we'll be happy. Not happening. It's never happened, right? So that's why passion is considered a problem. Actually, it's not. If it's there, you have to work with it, right? I have a bit of ADHD, and so I can be very passionate. I can really like hyper focus on projects, and it's not a good thing. It doesn't make me more productive. It's just that burning feeling. I have to do this, otherwise my life will end. But I have to work with it. And so you can, right? But don't go looking for it. That's the idea. Because if you go looking for it, if you start to idolize it and make it a goal in itself, this is what will burn people out, right? And that puts them in that mode of ignorance. Mode of ignorance is, it's not stupid. Like very highly, highly intelligent people are in the mode of ignorance. It's like the verb of the root, like to ignore, right? So you're, if and this is where we can get back to the example, like, oh, I have to get up and do this shitty job I don't like for not enough money, and then I have to go shopping, and then I have to get back, and the wife is going to want attention, and then the kids, and then I have to walk the dog, and then, finally I have a little bit of time for my get rich quick scheme, my crypto scam, or whatever passion project I've got. I'm deliberately painting it a little bit like a caricature right now, right? But the problem is that as your mind is operating in this way, you're ignoring all the beauty in the world, right? You're ignoring that you have a wife that loves you and wants your attention because she loves you. You have children who are depending on you, and you're a potential force for good in their life. You can create this beautiful life, and okay, you could even say, oh, you have to walk the dog. Yeah, you have functioning limbs. You can go anywhere. You can go out and you can smell the flowers, and you can, and you have a job where you can serve other people. If we look at that from the mode of goodness, that you can actually improve the lives of others throughout your work if you just stop making it about you all the time and the money that you're making. Suddenly exactly the same situation becomes quite amazing, right? It's actually quite nice, but we're too busy measuring ourselves based on results and compared to other people. And we never measure ourselves compared to people who are struggling more than us. We're always measuring compared to people who are doing better than us. And that means by comparison, we will always feel like we're not doing well enough, right? And so, well, that was just a thought that just disappeared. Yeah. We're measuring how we feel on the inside with how other people look on the outside. So I come to work, I try to project success, right? I got everything under control. My colleague, who may also be in the mode of ignorance, will compare how he feels with all of his problems and all of that. He will compare that feeling with my projection of success, and I've got everything figured out. And I will do the same with him. And we will both feel like, oh, he's got it figured out, and I'm such a schnook, right? So that's a problem, right? So this is all based on false ego, based on this ego that I am my situation, I am my past, I am my possessions are like an extension of me. Like you look in the mirror, this is me. But then whatever you're wearing, if it's like all designer clothes and stuff, you feel like $1 million. And if you're wearing whatever this is, it's like, what am I even doing? Right? But that's all false. It doesn't. Yeah, go on.
Could you expand on how would you define the ego? I know I have an idea from psychology of what the ego is. How is the ego itself being portrayed in Eastern philosophy?
Well, ego means identity, So that means there are certain characteristics that make up your identity in the world, right? And so if we want to talk about how the East views it, we're talking about the difference between what we just described as the false ego, that my identity is all the externals and all the past experiences and future dreams. And then we want to, okay, that is, all of that can sort of change. Even your past, even though factually your past doesn't change, but your view of it as like, whether I was traumatized as a kid because I was moved around all the time. I didn't have a chance to like find any roots, or is it a great gift I was giving because it means I can go into the world and feel comfortable anywhere because I'm very quick at picking up social and cultural cues, and so I can very quickly adapt to new situations. I can go in and give public talks in all sorts of, like, I do talks for addicts, for example. That's part of my charity work. I work with tech founders and CEOs and everyone in between, university programs and in all sorts of countries. And I can do that. Why? Because I moved around a lot as a child. So I'm used to reconfiguring my social skills. So which is it? That's up to me. I get to choose, right? So that's, as an identity, that's false. I can change that, right? So what's the real identity? Well, on a base level, it's very, very simple. You are a servant. You are a servant. And from the passionate false ego perspective of the West, that sounds like, ooh, that means like I'm the bottom of the pile. No, that's the top of the pile. Mm-hmm. Because why, like, what is the precedent? He's the servant of the country. He has the top position because he serves the entire country. The CEO is less, he's less because he only serves the entire company. And the receptionist in that company is less than the CEO because she only serves whoever calls on the phone and comes through the door. So the more servant you are, the higher a position you have, right? If you want to succeed, you have to serve, and you will. There is no way around it, right? If you don't want to serve a higher purpose, if you don't want to serve other people, you will be serving your senses, right? That's what addicts of all varieties do. They can continuously and excessively serve their senses, whether it's shopping on Amazon for stuff you don't need with money you don't have, or if it's intoxication, or if it's sex. There's that sense of need in your body that you are then serving to try and get rid of it. And the reason it's not recommended is because on that lowest level of service, the compulsion just gets worse the more you try to satisfy it. The more you drink, the more of an alcoholic you'll be. The more you buy on Amazon, the more empty and disappointed you'll feel. The more sex you have with random people, the more alienated and lonely you'll actually be, right? And this study showed that this is the case, right? So we recommend that transferring that low level of service to a higher level of service, right? Ultimately serving the supreme, which is a philosophical concept where everything is included, right?
Yeah. Okay, when you basically stated the goal, no, you stated that a president or a CEO is then at a higher position because they serve more people. Then it feels like my childish brain is like, oh, okay, the passion or the goal is to serve more people.
Yeah.
And to but I feel instantly in that thought is, oh, I get more recognition, or there is a better status when I serve more people. So my goal is then now, instead of doing whatever else the false ego is telling me, going then in, how can I serve more people?
Hmm.
But it still feels like there's the passion in there,
Yeah, yeah,
because I want something out of that. Because I
yeah,
serve more people, I get something in return.
yeah, yeah.
I think
You know,
that feels
that's
like fairly normal thought, but it feels like something
yeah,
is off with that.
yeah, yeah. That's how, if you look at LinkedIn, all the virtue signaling, that's that, right? You want to signal that you're a selfless person, right? And but that's okay. You know, you start where you are, and if you're in this mode of passion, or you've been, let's say, we've been conditioned by modern society forever that, you know, you happiness comes from that sense of control and enjoyment. You can control the scenario, everyone will be impressed, and you can enjoy that attention, and all the money and whatnot will follow. Then there are exercises that help you to transcend that way of thinking. But how are you not going to approach the mode of goodness from the mode of passion? If you're in the mode of passion and you want to be in the mode of goodness, you will literally approach the mode of goodness from the mode of passion, right? So the initial way of thinking about it will still be passionate. Oh, I'll get what I want if I don't worry about what I want, right? So that's why in the East they have these spiritual practices, right? Because those spiritual practices are exercises that take your brain and your mind out of passion into actual goodness, right? Until you start to generate experiences of the just the bliss of actually being selfless, right? Because there's no fear when you're selfless. Fear only happens when you think about yourself and your own safety or lack of, right? And so once you get to that point, that's why people talk about, you know, operating from a position of faith. Faith is not belief. It's not like, do you believe in some wizard sky daddy? That's what certain people who may be anti-spirituality, they will picture it like that, right? That's not what we're talking about. Everyone has faith in something. People have faith in the economy, or right now in America, they're freaking out because people are losing faith in the economy, right? So there's no question of operating without some sort of faith. But if we want to be consistently happy, we have to develop faith that being selfless will get that. And when we do, we experience it as true, right? Because fear can't exist when you're not being selfish. And then that just becomes more and more of a natural state, right? So that just snowballs your conviction into actually, when I'm feeling down, I have to actually, this is where it's kind of counterintuitive to psychology and self-help and all of these, is that if I'm feeling down and depressed and fearful, whatever, anxious, all of that, what I actually have to do is go out and do something for someone else and not shout about it. Right? Go out and do something good and tell nobody about it. That's like, what? But at the same time, I mean, it kind of makes sense. No? I'm asking you.
Well, now, based on what you said, of the fear comes when you obsess about yourself. If you understand that logic, it makes sense that if you help somebody else, don't shout about it. Just focusing on how can I improve someone else's life, then you have to put the focus on something else. So that 100% makes sense. However, I think where the foundation of that is the understanding that in order for me to be happy, I need to focus on improving other people's lives. I think that is difficult to understand. That feels very counterintuitive. Everything that is in psychology, everything that is in the self-help world is around do something for yourself, have your passion project, have some me time, have something for yourself so you can recharge and then do something else again. So I think that is the narrative that comes up most of the times. Like focus on yourself so you get the energy and then you can focus on others too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is the very counterintuitive thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It is counterintuitive when you have been conditioned. I was almost going to say brainwashed, but let's say conditioned to thinking that your life is all about you, right? It's or predominantly about you, right? And your energy to do good in the world comes from you focusing on you, right? When in reality, it turns out it's actually the other way around, or that's actually the opposite of true, right?
And it's fascinating because you did grow up in Europe, in Denmark, and you spent quite some time in Berlin, where I assume you've been sort of conditioned in the same way. So when did that flip for you happen? Was it a longer process or was it a one-time experience? And how did you, like, I assume, at least my perception now is that you got maybe the insight, then it fell away, then you had to get it again and it sort of built up, or was it different? Can you share how that flip happened for you?
It's like a mixed bag, and in one sense, it's an ongoing process, right? It's not like a binary. Ooh, got it. Yeah, like you say, I moved around a lot as a child. I spent some time in Berlin. I spent some time in Barcelona as well. I on paper I had a fabulous upbringing, right? Very stable, nice parents. I did very well in school, especially compared to how much effort I put into it. I'm just a good orator. I don't know why. I just am. And so even if I hadn't made my homework, I could find some way of saying something relevant, just pick up what others had been saying, whatever, right? I'm a hacker in a sense. Like I was also hacking computers, and I was exploring subcultures and skateboarding and techno DJing and at one point I had my own company. It was making computer games, and if you just look at that from the outside, it sounds pretty cool, right? The problem was I was miserable because these things weren't. I mean, I say miserable, that maybe is a little bit too dramatic. It wasn't horrible all the time, but there was always, even from young childhood, there was always this feeling that something is missing, or I'm not quite fitting in, or it's not really giving me what I want. I was always a bit disappointed. And I was also feeling guilty about that because, hey, on paper, I have everything. Like, why, looking at some of the struggles that other people have, why wouldn't I be happy? And I tried therapy, and I tried hypnosis, and I tried ayahuasca ceremony, and nothing worked. It was like I came into the psychologist, and she was telling me, you're a capable young man. You go out and maybe find another job and find a girl. Or no. This is why I'm here. I've done all of that, right? So that was like some realization that this kind of, without having the language of false real ego or anything, it was just like, this is just not working for me. And so some of the attempts at solving it became increasingly reckless, you could almost say. Like I was towards the end in my 20s, I was kind of testing the limits of reality with some radical political activism, throwing rocks at police and McDonald's and stuff, and you know, in my head I was experimenting with drugs, but it wasn't really an experiment as much as it was just an escape from reality that became increasingly unhealthy, and it culminated in like quite severe depression, and then subsequent medication, because nobody knew what to do with me, so they just started putting me on increasing amounts of medication. And that's when, like you said, there was one like kind of moment of clarity, which was, it wasn't the positive moment of clarity. It wasn't like a light from the heavens. It wasn't like, oh, this is what I'll do. It was the other way around. It was like, oh, this is what I don't do. And it was pretty much my whole life, right? Like all of what I'm doing now is having adverse effect on my usefulness to the planet and my happiness. And it was just like, this is a complete mess. And that's when I then traveled to India and ended up becoming a monk, right? And then, you know, you put on the bed sheets and you chant the mantras, and it's just like, I felt like I just escaped a burning building. Like modern life had become like a burning building I was just desperately trying to escape. And so when that initial kind of panic or post-traumatic stress, whatever you want to call it, kind of subsided after a few months, that's when I had sort of the positive light bulb moment where it's like, wait a minute, I'm actually happy. This is more than just escaping the pain. This is like, I'm actually positively happy. Like I am inspired of getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning. I used to not have gone to bed at that time, and now I'm getting up at that time, and I'm not intoxicating myself at all. I go to a temple and I meditate and sing songs for God, and like, what am I even doing? Whatever it is working a lot better than I could even imagine, right? And so you sit there and you think, why? Like what is working about that? Because like you say, this is counterintuitive. Like this is like, by all on paper, this is boring. This is like the same day over and over again. Never intoxicating myself, never going to a party, never buying anything, no possessions. I'm just wearing the same. I had 2 sets of bed sheets. One I was wearing, one I was washing. What is working here?
I find it hilarious that he called them all some bed sheets.
Yeah, it works better than dhoti and kurta, you know. So it's like, what is happening? And what is happening is I am focusing on serving others. That means when I'm sitting in class and hearing philosophy, when my teacher says something that I quote unquote disagree with, I say in quotation marks because I have no idea. He's the teacher, right? But at the Western, like, well, I disagree with it. It's like we think we're experts on everything. But I suspended that for like deliberately, consciously. Like, let's run the experiment of assuming that he's right and I'm wrong. And that really opened up the world for me. And I think that's why within a very short time, I kind of became the teacher's pet. Not that I wasn't sucking up to him or anything, but I just made a hell of a lot of progress for that one reason. That what if we like try to be there for the teacher rather than expect the teacher to be there for me. Rather than me going to class and sitting down, all right, I'm here, enlighten me, right? And consider, is this worth it? Is like, should I go? Like, oh no, that's the rule. You go every day, you're on time, every time. And if you ask a question and you don't like the answer, that's a you problem, not a him problem. That's just that's the rule. Let's just run the experiment for a year. And it blew my mind. Right? What you can learn when you actually make yourself teachable. Right? So, and similarly with the menial service I was doing cleaning, I was doing some temple service. How about we just try and focus on doing that nicely, regardless of what anyone says? And it was very quick. I was giving lectures, like compared to people who'd been there 10 times longer than me. Because somehow or other, and I don't take any credit for this, maybe it was the amount of suffering, maybe it was just that the teacher happened to have like a very similar way of thinking as me. Whatever it was, I managed to do that, to not make it about me and my happiness. And it just rocketed me into like the fourth dimension, and so, and here's the interesting, when we get to that part where it's like an ongoing process, because that gave me attention, right? And before you know it, I'm traveling to other temples to give class. It helps that I'm 6'7" and in India, like a white 6'7" monk in India is like, that in itself, regardless of what I'm saying, is interesting. But that then had an adverse effect on my false ego, right? I went from the real ego of just being of service, without thinking about the benefits or what am I getting from it, gave me a lot of benefit. But then that became part of my false ego. My false ego fed off of that. Oh, I'm the guy who gets a lot of respect. I'm the guy who makes progress quicker than other people. That's back to the false ego. And so suddenly you become a little proud. It's like, hey, don't you know who I am? And, usually it takes 20 years before people start talking about you becoming a guru. There are people talking about that after 5 years. Some of the elders, I'd been around for 5 years, and they're like, yeah, you should be a guru. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of should, and that's when it stopped being fun, right? That's when I started traveling the world and like the passion project. Okay, how many destinations in the United States can I have, right? If I just go every other day. And it's like, now it's about me again, right? So that was a tricky time. And that's when I had to realize, actually, I have to make some changes. And I'm not going to be a guru, because that would be terrible with the sense of self that I'm working with right now. So that's the tricky part, right? Is that this false ego has been with you for a hell of a long time, and it's incredibly good at mimicking your own thoughts and your own voice, right? It speaks to you in your own voice. And you think this is your idea and this is real, right? You're so convinced. And then only when it starts really being painful, that's like, something's not right here. So my decision was then okay, I'm not going to be a guru. I'd also talked with others that were newly appointed gurus and people who'd been gurus for like 50 years. And just based on what they were saying, I felt like if I go down this path, I will in some way take part in a circus, like the spiritual circus, where people come in and they like bow down and they want to touch your feet, and it's like a theater play. It's not really the essence of what this is about, right? And fortunately had enough self-awareness that I wouldn't be handling that all too well. So the alternative became also quite extreme, which is part of my, it's just part of my makeup. Part of my false ego, right, is that it's often extreme. Though I went to London to work with these tech founders and tech CEOs, because tech people are the rock stars, right? Them and influencers, that's who everyone wants to be today. So I was feeling like, Jesus, the East is learning a lot from the West, but the West is not learning much from the East. So people are burning out. We talked before about the decline in mental health just in general. And so I think I can make more impact if I just go there just as a person and just try to give this philosophy and try to give this lifestyle. But what I didn't count on was that at this point, I had lived for a decade completely disconnected from modern society, shopping, paying bills. I don't know what a national insurance number is. I don't know how to pay taxes. I don't care. I genuinely felt like I'm beyond all of that, right? And I still think like I'm so humble, right? But I mean, that's not for me, right? So that was a very, that was a harsh awakening to a very mundane and harsh reality, right? So again, with the false ego, right, is that you need it to operate, right? I had to relearn all the basics of material life. And I also had to learn the language that people spoke, because it's different from 10 years ago. Like smartphones became like arguably the strongest drug we have while I was a monk. I became a monk like 2 years after the first iPhone came out. So while everyone else was being groomed by cat videos and fake news, I didn't have a phone, right? So it's like, it's bizarre, right? Everyone has been faded into this reality. For me, it's like, I'm looking at it from the outside. It's like, what happened?
Yeah, let's keep in mind the false ego. I want to come back to that.
Sure.
But also the change that happened, because you exactly in that time have gone and become a monk, being distant from all the internet, social
Pretty
media,
much
not the internet, but the social media.
Direction, yeah.
Exactly. And the sort of social media addiction or phone addiction, the terms that are being thrown around, I think I'm fairly familiar with that. Let's say it's been a big factor in my life too, that I notice a lot of the drive towards some sort of either status or just checking, or my mind is very much, as you said, a nice word, groomed to using those platforms.
Yeah.
And so for the past few years, I remember already, what was that, 10 years ago in an NLP workshop, that was a theme that I noticed, that I wanted to change that I was too into it. And it took me super, super long to actually understand what's going on and what's happening and how to change it, and still ongoing process, right? But from your perspective, what is the constant attention of the smartphone or the social media doing to the mind of people?
Well, it's the opposite of meditation, right? Meditation is, in its purest form, is focusing on focus, right? Focusing on, like, you could say, the supreme eternal steady, right? It's like the ultimate level of selflessness, because you're literally just not worried about any desires or needs or sensations in that yeah, you're not identifying with them, you're observing them, but you're focusing your mind on the ability to focus, so to speak, right? And that means you can control yourself and you can be of maximum service. Like, if people knew how productive they could be, it's wild, right? And social media does the opposite. It's just like what are the videos are down to 15 seconds now, right? Like people can't read a book anymore, right? So it destroys your ability to focus, and it instills in you a constant feeling of FOMO. Like there's constantly something you're missing out on. There's so much content being produced that if you're not scrolling constantly, you're missing it. You're gonna miss the next video. You're gonna miss the whatever it is, right? And that makes it impossible to be happy and to be at peace, right? So it's we're against. It's not like a political movement against, right? But from the East, we would say that there are certain activities that just disturb the mind too much. So that means intoxication, gambling, overindulgence in like meat eating and processed foods, junk food, and these things. Frivolous sex, like sex with people you don't have an emotional connection with. And without a shadow of the doubt, the social media comes into that category as well. If you want to be happy, actually happy, not just not worrying, but like positively happy, like I described in when I first came to India, I'm sorry, you can't be on social media. It's not like, oh, it's just a tool and we just have to learn to use it. No, it's not. You like, imagine you said that about fentanyl, right? It's the hardest drug it is. I mean, it won't kill you from an overdose. It's not like you're scrolling TikTok and then suddenly you have a heart attack, right? But it will consume your mind and your thoughts, right? So it's not great. It's not great. So then, okay, let's get practical, because that sounds a little, that's too much, right? Just reduce the number of platforms you're on, right? Maybe not have them on your phone. Maybe just have them on the laptop, or like find ways to just reduce it. But ideally, right, the ideal is zero. And I don't think it does anyone any favors to pretend it's not zero. And it can change. Just like today, lots of people have just stopped drinking alcohol. Right? When I became a monk, that was like, you stopped drinking alcohol? Like stopped? Like, what are you, a fanatic, an alcoholic? What's the problem? Right? But that changed. It's just a lot of young people just don't feel, it's not really giving me what I want from life. And that is amazing. Yeah. Because when you don't drink alcohol for like 3 months or 6 months or a year, the amount of mental resources and inner balance it gives you is tremendous. Like today, like I used to go out, like I used to have already had like 5-6 beers when I went out. And now when I see, like I in my work, I go to dinners, with professionals, and they're drinking. And I don't have a problem. It's not like it's not like a guilt trip I'm laying on anyone. It's fine. I'm having conversations with them. We're having a good time, and that's fine. But I can sense a distinct difference in their level of consciousness from just one unit of alcohol, one beer, one glass of wine. Immediately you see a shift down towards attention on me, right? Like less listening to others, more talking without necessarily thinking much about what they're saying, raising the voice, laughing more. It's not that funny. I mean, a joke is funny, but they laugh more than it's, you know. And so, if we want to be truly happy, we have to avoid those like very intense sense enjoyment things that are essentially exploiting our system, right? Like, there's a reason we call it intoxication. It's toxic. It's a nerve toxin, right? So back to the false ego, right? These things will massively feed the false ego. This notion that it's about me and my desires, right? And so, in the pursuit of the real ego, this benevolent, generous, selfless ego, there are also activities, right? So we were mentioning before about doing these unknown little acts of service. There's like when you tell someone, you kind of cash it in, right? I did this wonderful thing, right? That's why the companies, when they give the charity check, the check is always huge, so everyone can see how good they are. That doesn't work. It's like when you keep it secret, you always have it like that. I do, like, my charity work is more important to me than the work I'm being paid for. I need to pay bills. I've learned that by now, but what nurtures me from the inside is the stuff I do without expecting anything in return. The stuff I do for addicts who are not able to repay the favor, right? Of having given so many lectures and traveled so much, there are quite a few that reach out to me when they have some sort of spiritual crisis, and being able to be there for them and just give them a little bit of context and ease the discomfort a little bit. That's what gives me the fuel that we think passion will, right? But that's more it's more in the form of inspiration. It's effortless. It's not that, like, right? It's just like I'm free flowing through life, and that's delightful, right? Meditation is another such activity that just lifts you up above this kind of maze of attachments and desires, right? Reading old books, there's a reason they're still around. Compared to a tweet that's forgotten tomorrow, it'll only be brought out if we need to cancel you. Then we can find tweets that are a decade old, right? But otherwise, it's here now. It's gone in half an hour. But old books, there's a reason why they're still around, like the Bhagavad Gita or the classic novels. Even it doesn't have to be like spiritual literature, but the classic novels like Don Quixote or Les Miserables or something, they're classic because they touch on some fundamental truth about the human condition. And that means you get that sense of catharsis, and that means you don't have to buy stuff on Amazon right after you've been reading one of these books. You know what I mean? It helps us to get a little bit of perspective. Right? So this is what is known as spiritual practice. Right? You're practicing being in a spiritual mindset. So that would be the Eastern advice if you want to shift away from this needy false ego of constantly, you can do it, you're worth it, and all of that, into more of the, dare we say, saintly, right? Sense of self-satisfaction, but without making it about yourself. In that way, where you can be a force for good in the world consistently. That would require some sort of spiritual practice. Even your lifestyle as well. Like we were talking about, maybe not intoxicating ourselves so much, but then, get good sleep, eat good food, get the nutrients, exercise, do some yoga, go for a walk, smell the flowers, touch grass.
When we talk about meditation, so that's a practice. Obviously, since 6 years I've been doing daily now, and there is there's a certain sense that I'm doing it. It feels great. I feel more grounded afterwards. I do it in a certain way, which is, I would say most of the time it's the body scan that I fall back on. So essentially just putting my mind towards scanning any sensations that are happening across my body. I know you do the mantra meditation. So you have a mantra and you repeat that in your mind or out loud.
Mm-hmm.
What is the core essence of there are a lot of meditation techniques out there, right? A lot of different ways of meditation. What would you say is the core essence of meditation, and what to focus on, whether you're on the right track or whether you need to adjust your meditation practice, or is there a way to notice that you do meditation right in sort of way? A lot of times people say, yeah, you can't do it wrong, just sit down for 5 minutes. I've done that now a million times. So what's when you notice then, okay, I'm doing some sort of practice, am I still on the right track because I don't have anyone to check in with?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's I remember once, for whatever reason, my mind is good at meditating. I heard recently some ADHD specialists say that people with ADHD tend to be like super good at meditation. Just as good as we are at being distracted, just as good we are at actually focusing if we choose to. However, I remember I'm in one of those sessions where I'm like meditating for 8 hours or something like that. And at some point, the thought occurs to me, I'm so freaking self-realized now. And then it's gone, right? Because the idea of measuring yourself is antithetical to the idea of letting go of measuring yourself. That's part of the essence of meditation, is that you let go of this constant judgment of yourself and others, and where am I, and am I performing, and am I using my time effectively? And before you know it, you end up just doom scrolling for 4 hours because the mind is just, it just burns out the mind, this constant. So I would just advise against it. You know, it's not, like you say, factually, you can't really do it wrong. It's not like ice skating, right? It's just give your mind a rest, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think there is a perception that there are more types of meditation than there are. Basically, you have a few different versions. Excuse me. I have something stuck in the throat. Ease of approaching meditation, but really only a few. There's oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna have to cough this up. So, okay. Where was I? Meditation. Okay, so I think there's a perception that there's so many different ways of meditation, and in one sense, even in the scriptures, it's explained that everything is meditation. Like you're always focusing on something, even if your brain is completely scattered. Like usually, a lot of people are like, when it gets closer to the weekend, people are very good at meditating on some sort of frivolous activity or sense enjoyment, right? They're really naturally inspired, right? So you could say everything is meditation, but only when it gets to a certain quality, we would call it as that meditation, right? And that's the operative quality is detachment. Detachment from the material drives and desires, right? So a lot of people start with some sort of guided meditation, right? A guided body scan or some sort of guided meditation. There is You could say like a walk in nature can be a form of meditation, because you're being with eternal nature, really, right? And so that sense of busyness and passion kind of tends to naturally subside. Like we've talked about before, it's like in depression treatment, it's like, what do you mean? Just going for a walk and I'll feel better? And your answer was yes. That is the case, right? So it in some sense, that even like just existing with nature is a form of meditation, right? And then you have more active meditation, where you can, like you're saying with your body scan, you are actively choosing to focus on certain sensations in the body, or you can run through the different parts of the body systematically. Mantra meditation is one of them. Mantra means, man is for manas, which mind, the word mind is derived from the ancient Sanskrit manas. Tra comes from triyate, which means to deliver. So it's a sound that liberates the mind, right? So the mantras are designed in such a way that they free the mind, and it maybe sounds a little woo-woo, but it really isn't. I usually use the example of and So if you get something nice to eat, you would say and if you're in the movie theater and someone is being loud, you would say shh. There's never a person in the history of humanity who has gotten something nice to eat and gone shh, right? Because it just doesn't compute. So sounds have an objective effect on our consciousness. The sound it relates to the body, and the food relates to the body, a pleasant sensation in the body. And shh is like white noise. It approaches the intellect, like pay attention, right? So you can construct sounds and words that have this effect of helping the two halves of the brain communicate better, and drawing energy away from what we call the lizard brain, right, where all the base instincts are, the kind of animal instincts, up to your frontal lobes, right? So when I do my meditation, when I'm done, I can physically feel this part of my brain. Like I can feel the electricity in this part of the brain, because so much energy has been transferred up there. That's what the mantra can do, right? So essentially, those are like your types of meditation. Like they're either on your own or with someone, either guided or in a group or something. And they're either passive, as in a walk in nature, or just like passively being guided by someone else, or active in the sense of you're choosing. You can focus on a candle, you can focus on a picture of a deity, or you can focus on the sound of a mantra. And so the active meditation in solitude is considered superior to passive, right? Because you are actively practicing rather than being taken by the hand, right? And the mantra then is, in the East, considered the superior than compared to the passive, right? Or So like that.
Okay.
But again, back to what you were saying, try to avoid this consideration of, am I doing it right? Because it tends to lead us to the conclusion that I don't know if this is for me, which is something I hear often in the West, which is like, it's like saying healthy food is not for me, or exercise is not for me, or good sleep is not for me. It's like I understand why, because if your mind is constantly scattered and then you sit down, what happens is it feels like your mind is freaking out. But the reality is, no, your mind was already freaking out. You're just noticing how freaked out it is right now. You're just noticing.
Yeah.
And so in a sort of ironic way, the worse it feels, the more important it is you do it, right? Because it means that your mind is just out of balance. It's similar to someone who's in terrible physical health going to the gym. It's not going to be fun the first couple of times, right? But that's why you have to just stick with it. And then obviously, just like the out of shape guy who goes to the gym, start soft. The main thing is just make it part of your life, like taking a shower and eating and sleeping. But then once it is incorporated as a habit, as a part of your life that you're not worried about, or you don't have to convince yourself, then if you want, you can try and optimize it. But the whole idea of this mode of goodness, of this real as opposed to false ego, is don't worry so much about the result, right? Because if you worry about the result, it's like you'll want to try and exploit it, right? You want to maximize the result and minimize the effort, right? And so the moment you're not getting the result you feel you should, you're going to be wondering, why am I doing this? Right? And so this is how, you get downstream from that, you get crime. It's just a lot easier to rob a bank than to get a job. So you maximize the result, you minimize the effort, right? But there will be consequences. There always is, right? So when you, again, counterintuitively reverse that, how much effort can I put in and how little do I expect from it? This can make you happy. Constantly.
My mind is like, what?
It's upside down.
The more effort you put in, and the less effort the less outcome.
The less you need from it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
It's the kid's birthday, right? Mom has been preparing this birthday for 2 weeks. Getting the right cake, getting the decorations, getting the gift, what is he getting, and what's he going to be wearing, and getting the invitations, and all the friends are coming, and and the kid just shows up, gets the gift, gets super excited, has a sugar overdose and a mental breakdown, and then it's time for bed. Who gets the most benefit out of the birthday party? The mom is inspired for 2 weeks and thinking about this, and you can do this, and oh, that goes well with that, and because it's not for her. Whereas the kid is like, where's the present, and it's okay, maybe exciting, and maybe it's an impression on the mind that time they had a bouncing castle or whatever, but the real happiness from this whole project is it lands with the mother more than the child, because it's not for her. Anxiety comes from the idea that it's for me, the world is here for me. That's where anxiety comes from, right?
Then one thing that came to my mind earlier when where we were talking about the identity of the servant, the sort of more real ego, or the real identity, is a downside which could happen, is the being a doormat for other people, just doing things because I do it for everyone else.
Yeah.
I'll do it for you, and if somebody asks me, I'll do it.
Yeah.
What about
this
that?
is one of the favorite tricks the false ego has, is that you're being so selfless if you're being a doormat, but you're not actually. It's still about you, right? You're still thinking about, I'm doing all of this, and I'm not even and you see it in spiritual circles, people who've been around for years, they're still like, I was doing all of this service and nobody recognized, and they're taking advantage and stuff. So There is a specific verse. It's one of my favorites for this reason, because it deals with this, which is it's about austerity of speech, but speech and action are interchangeable in this context. Is that whatever you say should be pleasant, truthful. I do believe truthful actually is mentioned first, but that's a detail. It should be truthful and pleasant. It should be beneficial, and it should not disturb the minds of others. Those are your four checkpoints in whatever you do and say. And so that word beneficial, being a doormat for someone is not benefiting them. It's actually enabling toxic behavior in the other person. Right? So if you want to serve other people, you have to also not let them treat you like dirt, because that is a destructive behavior. It's not just destructive for you, it's often more destructive for the person engaging in that behavior, right? Like narcissism is a terribly difficult thing to treat. So if you allow yourself to be a doormat, you're not serving anyone. That's not helping them. Right? So part of that, you can say there is truthful and beneficial as kind of coupling, which are about being transparent and assertive and being real about where are your boundaries and what is actually going on with you. And then on the other hand, you have pleasant and not disturbing the minds of others, which is kind of like accommodating their version of reality, right? Where you shouldn't be harsh. You should be friendly. And just disturbing the minds of others is more like, don't overload people with information, Does that make sense? So if I'm touching on something, let's say we're discussing literally this topic with some tech CEO who is going to be raising funds to expand the business, and it's kind of like stressing him out. And I come in and I say, well, just don't make it about you. And then and that already is kind of like, that's news, right? I haven't necessarily lost him yet, but if I go straight into a long explanation of how sages would apply this in South India for thousands of years ago, and how actually the embassy district in New Delhi is named after a guy who is like an expert on this particular topic, and it's like, he's already trying to process the idea that you gave him, and then you're just dumping all of this sort of quote unquote knowledge or just information overload on him. So that would be like, don't disturb the minds of others, right? Just in many cases, if you want to influence people, less is more, right? A little nudge in the right direction, and just let them experiment with it, or let them just sit with it for a little bit and get used to that idea that if I want to raise capital to expand my business, I have to not make it about me. Technically, that's not hard to understand, but if you're already stressed out and you come to someone like me for help, and I'm saying, yeah, it's not about it, it could almost sound like nobody cares, right? So just let them sit with it for a little bit instead of dumping a whole truckload of information on top of it, right? So pleasant, try not to, one of the things you said, I have a deep voice. I also have a strong voice. So I have to be actively conscious of not raising my voice, because I get excited. And I've noticed when I get excited, I can sound aggressive. And I'm not aware of it, right? So this verse is really, really beautiful in terms of just keeping you on, am I being pleasant, or am I talking too loud? Am I being truthful? Do I actually mean what I say? Do I think it actually relates to reality, or is it just some political spin I'm doing? Is it actually beneficial to the other person? Is it something that will make their life moving forward better? And am I avoiding disturbing their mind with too much of myself talking, right? So then from that, you can avoid this being a doormat thing, because it doesn't serve anyone. If anything, in some cases, it's just another form of false ego, is this self-pity. I do so much and nobody understands how selfless I am. You're literally just talking about yourself. Right? So that's why what we were saying before, reading these old books sometimes is really like mind-blowing. Right?
Yeah. Okay, so then what I got so far is that the false ego is essentially our identity that is in the past or in the future, and then the sort of real identity is us being servants, as us being just here to be selflessly looking for improving other people's lives, without this constant check-in of, am I doing right? Am I doing good enough? Am I doing well status-wise in some way or form or shape?
Yeah.
And when that happens, or that flip from, oh, how can I serve myself or my senses, to how can I serve other people, that's sort of the direction.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
somewhat accurate?
That's very accurate. It's like if I experience reality based on my material senses, my eyes, my sense of touch, my hearing, I will conclude that I'm the center of the universe, right? Everywhere I look, there's the universe. That means, relatively speaking, I'm in the middle of it. So if I work from that perspective, that means I will think everything is about me, and my success in life will be judged by what the universe gives me. But with a little bit of intellect, we can realize that's not the case, right? That there's 8 billion people in the world who perceive the world similarly in principle, right? So they can't all be the center of the universe, right? So that's your false ego. Whenever you base it on your sense perception or past sense perception or your projection into the futures, it's all you-centered. And the universe is huge. And you're very small. So if you try to make demands of the universe, it's going to say, nah. And guess who's going to win? Whereas if you think of it in the other way, where it's like, okay, the universe is huge, factually speaking. I'm just a little person. What if I just add a little value to this huge universe? Then maybe the universe is going to add a little value to me. And the universe being huge, that little bit of value is going to have a tremendous impact on little old me. That's the idea, right? The universe will mirror your mood. And so if you give to the universe with intelligence, not in that doormat kind of way, but if you just focus on adding value to your surroundings, it doesn't have to be other people. It can be washing windows. It can, whatever it is. Just there's a principle for monks that whenever you leave a room, it should be in better condition than when you entered. And it could be a tiny thing, just like a piece of paper in the corner or something. It doesn't matter. But if you incorporate that as a habit, you will the results you'll get are astounding. They'll come out of nowhere because somebody someday noticed your behavior, and you weren't doing it for them to notice. And that means when it comes to being promoted to partner in your company, they'll pick you. And there's no amount of self-help books or courses that would have had that effect. But that's again back to the faith. You have to just trust the process. Just focus on reversing that way of thinking, and then just trust it, that whether you get the promotion or not, just this is how you become happy. And it starts to drip feed and it accumulates. And that's when the faith starts to grow and you come into this positive reinforcing circle. And that means when accidents happen, which they do, your go-to is not, let me think more about myself. It's the opposite. That's what I do today. If I have some days something just doesn't work out, I'm really disturbed, the first thing I think instinctively is, is there someone I can call up and help? Or like, I work with these alcoholics or something, and I call up one of the guys and ask if he's doing okay. Or I clean the house, or that gets me out of myself, and that makes me better. And then more often than not, I get a call and it turns out that what I was disturbed about wasn't a big deal at all, right? What usually happens is people think something is not going their way. They call up and complain about it and make absolutely sure it's not going to go their way. That's how it usually goes.
Why is that such a thing? Why is the complaining and feeling comforted when others jump into the complaining? And why is that such a thing?
It allows us to feel better about it. It allows us to feel better about ourselves without having to better ourselves. Right?
So we get the benefit without the work.
Yeah, except it's like borrowing money. You have to pay it back with interest. There's always that feeling afterwards. And then that tweet is out there, or, and everyone knows what kind of person you are. And that's why you gang together with other people who are also offended, because then it's like safety in numbers, right? But then it's a terribly self-destructive path, right? Here's the rule of thumb. If you spend more energy on what you don't like than what you like, you have a problem. If your sense of identity is based more on what you're against than what you're for, if you don't have a solution but you only have a problem, right, then it's time to look inwards and start chanting some mantras. And you don't have to wear the bed sheets, but you know what I mean, right?
Yes.
That's a problem, because you can't be happy that way.
Yeah, it sounds very clear that the mind is in some way or form or shape, like in a crooked position, like it doesn't work normally, and it cannot produce actually beneficial things. So one quote that I love and I probably tell too many times is, the mind is a great servant but a bad leader.
Yeah.
Meaning that whenever I give my mind some task to do it, it'll do it. It's great at it. Once I give the task to give me direction, what should I do with my life? It's really bad at it. And I've been in that position where I ask my mind so many times, like, what should I do with my life? Like, where should I start? What's the thing I need to do? Whatever. That it always came back as like, I don't know. Like, maybe you're like wrong. Maybe you're in the wrong place. Maybe you're the wrong person. Like, it goes in a bad direction. Doesn't know how to figure that out. But whenever I ask it questions that it can solve, meaning that there is some sort of direction, it's like, what is a way for me to feel calm or comfortable? It's like, oh, usually this helps. This you could do. It's almost like asking ChatGPT in a way.
It pretty much
like I can ask my mind things that can be helpful for me, but the ego, in some way, my identity is choosing the question, and depending on the question that I choose, the answer will come. If I ask my mind, what are the things that, why am I so bad at this? Why do I always fail? Why is everybody against me? My mind will find a solution or an answer to that.
It will take for granted that everyone is against you.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's even a presupposition in there that,
Exactly.
oh, in order for that question to be there, it needs to be true that everybody's against me.
Yeah. But that
And
also
so the mind is
means,
like, okay, got it.
yeah, this point is made in the Bhagavad Gita as well, right? That the mind is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant. And so what does that mean if we want to make it a little bit more tangible? Think of it like a child. Like if you let the child run the house, it's going to go really bad for everyone, including the child. But you can create a safe framework for the child, so the child can inspire the hell out of you, right? Looking at children, even like if you look at an adult walking, it's not a big deal. But you look at a child walking, like a toddler that's learning to walk, it's hilarious. It's fantastic, right? Oh, he's down. Oh, he's up again. you know. So the similar way, that means also if we are addressing the mind, which we are, because it is like our consciousness is described as the soul. It's not mysterious. It's just our consciousness projects itself into the world through the mind, right? So you have to address the mind, and the mind then addresses the body, and the body then acts in the world, right? If that makes sense. And so you have to
Not really,
address.
yes. Can I ask?
Oh yeah, we can get much more into that.
So the
Do you want to
soul
ask that? Yeah.
or the
Okay,
consciousness
so you have a hierarchy.
projects
right?
itself through the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we want to be like go back to the false ego, real ego kind of principle, the real ego is the soul, is the consciousness. That's where your real personality resides. That's the true you. As a layer on that, or a mask, you could say, is the false ego, the idea you have of who you are. It's usually mixed between, like we were saying, the past and who you wish you were, who you want to be in the future, and that kind of gets a little distorted. So that's the type of person you want to project. So you think you can get what you want, right? So then what's the next natural step is then you have an intellect that can compare and contrast and discern in order to try and project that image, right? And then you have emotions. They are pushing and pulling. So they're pushing your body to act, and they're pulling you in the sense that if you experience something that used to be a bad experience, it'll give you an emotional impression. So, like if you've been burnt by fire, when you see fire, you are, careful. And you can have phobias, which are disproportionate fears compared to how dangerous a situation actually is, right? But it's some sort of, if your conditioned reality is trying to wake up your actual consciousness, then there's an emotional response, right? So then you have those three layers: false ego, intellect, emotion. And then there's the physical body surrounding it, right? So now I lost the plot. In what context were we discussing this?
You mentioned the story of the child seeing
the child, right. So if you're sitting there in your pure consciousness, you want to address the mind on its premise, right? That's what some people get wrong with spirituality, is that it's about just overriding the conditioning, or just negating whatever you think is you. There is no self. That doesn't make any sense. You can't exist without an identity. That's literally the definition of identity, that which exists, right? So, but what you want to do is learn how to deal with it appropriately. That means as a conditioning, right? So that's the same way you would deal with a child. It's like you don't talk logic to a child, right? If the child drops the ice cream, the world ends. You don't explain to the child that this is just in the greater scheme of things. When you're 25, you won't even remember. It's like, oh, did you choose your ice cream, right? You have to go into it on the premise of the child's reality. That's what a lot of people get wrong. It's like, no, you have to work with the mind in the way that, like, what's the right way to say it? You have to work with the mind the way that the mind works. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's false ego anyway, so I'll just not deal with it. That's when you get, like, what you could call, like, spiritual burnout. Like, you see these people, they come in and they get super serious really fast, and they meditate for days and they fast for days, and then suddenly you don't see them anymore, because it's like you're pretending to be somewhere you're not. You have to work with it the way it is, right? So that's how the mind is a great servant but a terrible master, right? So if the mind is going to serve you, you have to make it about them, kind of about the mind. Like, you have to accept where the mind is and then work from there, right? Not dissimilar to the CEO who's raising funds to expand the business. He has to go in and make it about the people who are already there, and make sure that they feel safe, that their job won't be taken away, or someone else they don't know is not going to come in and start changing everything, right? It's the same principle, that actually the child is actually the top of the food chain. If you want to benefit the child, you have to accept where the child is and work on the child's terms, so to speak, right? So that's how
It's
you advance
interesting, I
spiritually.
think. Also, when I'm with clients or with people I want to help in some way or form or shape, but that's also why hypnosis is so interesting to me right now, is that the premise of it is I need to understand their reality in order to maybe nudge them in some way or the other. I can't just impose my model of reality onto them and think that they're going to get anything out of this. Because it's my model of reality. And as you said earlier perfectly, everybody has their own model of the reality that we all perceive, but sort of through our own filters. And when we the awesome thing about hypnosis is, what I learned so far is that I tell you a lot of things that are very ambiguous, that are in some way you can take anything out of that. And that's actually why it's so amazing, because I give you some suggestions in a direction of well-being, of feeling good. Awesome. And you take everything out of it that is important and necessary for you, and you make stories up about your mind why you should be healthy, happy, and feeling good. And so
it's easier for the
give any
mind to...
suggestions. Exactly.
I was just going to say, it's easier
for
for
the
the mind to adapt it to its own reality. This is why people don't like preachers, right? Because they preach without understanding the situation the person is in. And the irony is that the actual meaning of the word preaching is communicating with people on their terms. It's somehow, because people have been so bad at it in organized religion and have had this sense of spiritual superiority, it's actually come to mean the opposite, right? But like you say, hypnosis is an amazing tool for telling people without telling them, because nobody wants to be told what to do. The mind will, like, you tell the mind it can't do something, it will immediately want to do it. That's why it's so hard to stop these bad habits, because if you tell the mind, okay, no more drinking, all the mind hears is drinking. That no more part, not important, right? So that's why I was just going to say, in addiction treatment or any type of trying to liberate people, you have to always work on the positive. You have to work on the benefits of sobriety. Not like, we can talk about the problems with intoxication and health and all of that, but it has to predominantly be about the glories of sobriety and waking up without a hangover and remembering what you did last night and, you know, all of these things, right? Because
It's almost in a way the basics of like don't try to get away from something, go towards something, because then you speak positively about the things that you want rather than the ones that you don't want.
and
That's
that was my problem when I was a monk, is that my motivation was getting away from my previous life. And that's partly why I had to go through that cycle again of that false ego when I started to have a strong sense of identity as a monk. That false ego about it came up again. Even I'm wearing the bed sheets, I'm chanting the mantras, all of that jazz, right? And I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And that immediately just destroyed it, right? Because my initial motivation was not towards the beauty of the spiritual practice. It was away from the suffering and the confusion of my previous life, right? And so I had to work through it again before I could truly embody it, right? Because I had a spiritual awakening as a result of the environment I had put myself in, right? So the internal work I had to do kind of separately afterwards. But of course, the environment then helped rather than the environments I used to be in, which definitely were not conducive, right? So it's kind of a dual effect, you could say.
Is there anything that comes to your mind now after we've spoken for so long already that you felt like is missing to the whole picture that we talked about, or highlighting something that felt as an important piece to you that we talked about?
One thing I'm noticing a lot these days is I think a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for how good they actually are. Like, we live in a world where there's a lot of confusion going on. There's like multiple wars and political upheaval and geopolitical whole trip going on, and cost of living, and, you know, you can keep going. What I've noticed, and I don't think enough people notice, is how good people actually are. Like, there's kind of a surface, if you look at, especially if you look at social media, where it's like, Jesus Christ. But if you notice, people actually want to be good. Like, because we've talked a lot now about the counterintuitive, like the materialistic society, and you make it all about you and all of that. But what I'm also experiencing is when I talk about these things with people, even if they just hear that I'm a monk or used to be a monk, and it's like their eyes light up. It's like, wow, that's fascinating. And you talk about this idea of doing secret good stuff that nobody finds out about. People are like, yeah, that's cool, right? So I think we get bombarded with impressions that are very shallow and very materialistic and very vain and all of that. But we don't have to dig very deep to get to some really beautiful stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not actually as bad as I think a lot of people think. Like, we're doing okay, right? And I do believe that it has definitely become a lot easier for me to talk about these things than it used to be. I can see the difference. Like, people are just more open, more interested. It's not like even the people who were interested like 5-10 years ago. Oh yeah, mindfulness. Yeah, I get it. You know, it's like, no, not really. It's not like a little booklet you read on your way to Ibiza when you're gonna get smashed for 2 weeks. But an actual genuine interest in it, and more people are meditating, more people are like charity things, like community building. It's really interesting to see that people are much more open to the idea of living differently today than even a few years ago, right? So in talking about these things, I think I'm probably one of the few people who thinks that the future is looking pretty bright, right? It may not be the futuristic flying cars utopia that we were promised by certain tech oligarchs, but I think it might be better than that, And all we have to do is like really that principle that we've been talking about today is the only that's the only thing. If you start working on that, you can be happy. And you can make other people happy where you are, regardless of what's happening in international politics. Right? That's perhaps one of those, Like learning to live like that, it kind of creates like a force field. It's like there's just, it's just the world doesn't bother you in the same way. And it's not that you're in denial. You're even more aware of what's actually going on. But it's just you can learn how to put your energy where it matters and not waste it on something you're not going to affect anyway. Right. So,
and something that I think came up as well. I think you mentioned at some point as well that what you give to the world is not what you do necessarily, but the energy that you project out to the world.
It's the vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds so loose and tangible, but it is when you notice that the person, for example, now us spending 2 hours together, I notice that there is a value in the energy that we are exchanging. It's super intangible, super hard to quantify, but there is something that makes me walk differently throughout the day now, based on the conversations that we had. And maybe even a person that's listening now to it is like, something resonated. I might want to change something. And that's because a lot of the things maybe a person listening to this or that I listened to is I might have heard that before already, but not in the same way, not with the same energy behind it, not with the same groundedness or whatever the mixture of those feelings are. But there's something valuable when there's with this true energy behind it. And I'm very grateful that we could spend the time again together, that you shared what you shared, and I'm looking forward to more talks with you as always. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. You listened to the full episode. Your investment to a more calm, confident, and doubtless self. Now you can make a commitment to yourself and help others discover this podcast. Simply by subscribing and following the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I hope to see you here soon again for the new episode dropping every other Thursday. Talk soon.